Welcome back to another episode of the Casey Campbell Podcast. Casey Campbell with you, of course. Pleased to be joined by the head football coach at East Grand Rapids. That, of course, is Josh Shattuck. Josh, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Doing well. Another football season coming up here, and just in a few weeks' time, official practices will begin. But how exciting is it to start? Of course, last year was your very first year in the program. How was it, making the transition and all that? And yeah, what was it like?
Yeah, first of all, we were really blessed to have just an unbelievable group of kids. We had 26 seniors last year, which is a lot to replace, but awesome kids. They bought in right away, which is really doesn't always happen in year one. You know, when you take over at the high school level, you get there in June, usually because you're fulfilling your contract at the school you were at previously. So it's a really, really quick summer. You're trying to install your new systems of offense and defense and special teams, your totally new staff. We had a couple of guys on staff that were on the staff from the prior year. But for the most part, we were a whole new staff, not only new for our kids, but we didn't know one another either. I didn't bring anyone with me from our prior staff in Indiana. So, it was a lot of things going on, a lot of moving parts, but those kids were awesome. The community, obviously, it kind of speaks for itself. The support here for football, I think, is very unique, and not to compare, but I haven't experienced anything like it when it comes to community and school support for football. So all those things together, it was a good year. Obviously, on the field, some frustrating things, but that's to be expected in year one. And I think those seniors really had a great year and helped set us up for success long term moving forward.
Yeah. Okay. So year one is in the books. Year two begins actually year two has begun, but of course it'll begin with official practices coming up in the next few weeks. So what is year two going to be like?
So I think the biggest change or difference is that our kids, have a year of weightlifting and off-season workouts under their belt. And sometimes that's tricky when you have a coaching transition. Because there's a big gap of time. I think, last year for these kids, it was basically, from the end of the season until June that there really wasn't, there wasn't a coach, or there was, basically the thick of the off season. There wasn't a coach or assistants really for that matter. So I think the weight room, that's the biggest thing. Our kids are bigger, faster, stronger. We still have a long way to go strength and conditioning wise, but I feel better about where we're at. And then the other thing is from just a schematic perspective, just our kids know our system. They know our offense or defense or special team systems. That doesn't mean we don't have work to do. It just means you're not telling them where to stand. You're not introducing formations or terminology the same way. So we're just able to fine tune and work on the skills and techniques a lot more this summer, as opposed to just where to go, which is a huge difference. And then obviously the biggest one of all is the interpersonal relationships, just knowing the kids and the kids knowing the coaches and building upon those relationships.
Yeah. Okay. Speaking of those kids, let's talk about them. Who are some of the for people that might not know, who are some of the names to watch for the Pioneers this year?
Yeah, so we've got a very unique senior class. We are not huge in numbers. Our school, we're actually, a lot of people think we're a bigger school than we are. We're under 900 kids in our official enrollment. We're basically right at 900. So we've got a senior class of about 16, 17, which is smaller than our last class, but we've got a lot of good players, a lot of returning starters in that grade. I'll start up front. I think the game's won and lost up front. And Jacob Kraus is a returning starter on the offensive line. We're going to move him from tackle to guard. He's 6'5", 250. He has a Ferris State offer right now, a couple other Division II offers. I mean, he's a really, really good player. And he only played in 4 games last year. He unfortunately had mono, which is very serious, obviously, not able to play contact sports with that. So, he's going to kind of come out of nowhere, which is good. We have a returning starter on our defensive line, Mo Maher, who was a really, really good player for us last year. He might play some offense as well. And so really up front, George Berniker is another one up front, returning starter at guard. He could play a little bit of center. We feel really good about kind of our our offensive and defensive lines when it comes to kids that we had last year. Um, in the skill positions, Ian McKeegan, returning all conference player. He's one of the better athletes in our conference. Very, very unique player. He's about 5'8", 5'9", really, really strong, really elusive, just phenomenal work ethic. And so he'll play some running back and some slot receiver for us. Scotty Millman was thrown into. So Scotty Millman started on defense for us last year, but then was our backup quarterback. Our starting quarterback got injured, unfortunately, in week 5 and was unable to return. So Scotty started 5 games for us and played in the better part of 6 games for us at quarterback. So he'll be back. But we also have Carson Thornton, who was our JV quarterback last year, who's made tremendous strides. And those 2 guys are really competing right now. And honestly, we'll probably have to play them both. And that's a good problem to have. It's 2 really good players at quarterback. But Scotty Millman also has the ability to play some running back. So we can be pretty diverse there. And then on the perimeter, I said Ian McKeegan back, but we have Tommy Cavanaugh, who was kind of a starter on defense, played a little bit of offense last year, and he'll be one of our receivers. And then we have a newcomer, Glenn Green, who's had a phenomenal summer, didn't play football last year, is one of our better athletes. And I think he'll surprise some people. And then tight end H-back, we've got Peter Heinz returning. He was a starter for us last year. And then Alex Collins will play some there. And a lot of those guys, almost all of them, are defensive players as well. So Alex Collins, returning starter at outside linebacker, kind of down safety. I talked about Mo Maher, Tommy Cavanaugh, returning starter. Charlie Hoekstra, who will start both ways for us when we're in our 10 personnel package, as a slot receiver and a safety for us. And kind of the list goes on. So Peter Heinz plays inside linebacker. We talked about those defensive linemen. So we have a lot of guys back, and we played a lot of kids last year, so that's really exciting. And our JV team was 7-2, and has a lot of talent as well. So we're looking forward for those kids to step up into some of these positions for us.
For sure. As I always like to do with a lot of these, I always like to talk about the upcoming the schedule coming up for you guys. Of course, kicking it off at home against Cedar Springs, and then on August 24th. Then on September 1st, you'll travel for your first game of the year against Grand Rapids South Christian. And September 8th, home against Lowell. September 15th at Greenville. September 22nd at Grand Rapids Northview. September 29th, home against Grand Rapids Forest Hill Central. October 6th, home against Grand Rapids Christian. October 13th, away at Byron Center, and then finishing off the season October 20th at Grand Rapids Forest Hills Northern. So pretty good schedule on there. Just kind of talk about it's gonna be another tough year for the OK Conference, but it's also really, really good competition as well.
Yeah, I love our schedule. I loved our schedule last year. Obviously, it's very, very challenging. We feel like the OK White is extremely competitive. I think the results in the playoffs showcase that. We had a team in our conference make it all the way to the state finals. Ended up being state runner-up in Forest Hills Central.
Yep.
We had Byron Center team went 7-2, made the playoffs. We had a Lowell team went. I think they were 6-3, made the playoffs, and played Zeeland West really, really tough in the playoffs. So we feel like we were a playoff team last year. So the competition, the OK White, I feel like week in and week out is really good. And then the teams that didn't make the playoffs in Northview, Forest Hills Northern, those are good football teams, well-coached teams. Greenville's getting a lot better. And so I just think that our conference is, I don't like to compare because every conference has good teams and teams that are in the middle of the pack or weaker teams or whatever. But I feel like top to bottom, just week in, week out, it's a really, really good football, really well coached. And then for our non-conference games to be Cedar Springs and South Christian, obviously you're playing a defending state champion who was 14-0. And they have a lot of really, really good players, and Coach Brown does an unbelievable job with them. And they're really good. And then Cedar Springs, that's a newcomer to our schedule. Obviously, extremely well coached, great football program. And then schematically, that presents a lot of challenges when you start the year with a kind of a full house T team. So, it's a tough schedule. There are no breaks in there. We have 4 home games this year instead of 5. So, I mean, we have to buckle up, but our kids should be ready for that. Last year we were we kind of talked before this, but we were Rockford, South Christian, Forest Hill Central in our first 4 games, and those 3 teams all went 9-0. So our kids are used to, or at least have gained some of that experience of playing really good competition and playing it right out the gate. So we're excited about our schedule.
Yeah. So I know that, to kind of talk about what's going on right now with your team and then heading into camp, what do you want to see out of your team before you head into that first game, August 24th against Cedar Springs?
Yeah, we've had a great summer. I think the challenge every coach has is summertime. Balancing, obviously you need to be doing a lot of football because your season's right around the corner. Your strength conditioning is important, and then getting some competition days, some camp days, and things like that. So we feel like we have a pretty healthy balance. You also don't want to burn your kids out. We want our kids excited for the beginning of football season, not tired from the summer. So it's finding that balance, and we don't hide behind it. We know if we're going to meet the expectations that we have of ourselves and our football program here, then we need to do a lot of football in the summer. But we try to balance that appropriately. But between now and then, really, it's we're going to team camp here next week, and then the kids have a week off in terms of the second dead period where there's no football specific activities. We'll do some strength conditioning, open up the weight room, but we don't have any practices or camps or football things. And then August 7th we start, and so for me it's really developing. I feel pretty good about where we're at, maybe from a scheme perspective and like running plays. We obviously, you're constantly trying to get better at that. But to me, it's a toughness, and kind of once the pads get put on, you're practicing your 2-a-days and your conditioning and those types of things. It's just that toughness because we know it's going to be a long season, and not in a bad way. We have really good teams on our schedule from the beginning, right out the gate with Cedar Springs, all the way to week 9 with Forest Hills Northern. And it's just good competition week in and week out. And so just developing that toughness and kind of that, that fortitude to get through the ups and downs that a season brings, because at the end of the day, I've always stressed, and I'm not the only one who does this, but we want to be playing our best football by the end of the year, and the only way you can do that is if you're mentally and physically tough. So that developing that as we lead into the season, and then those first couple of weeks of practice before game week, before school starts, kind of creating that toughness and having meetings and understanding how we're going to operate is what I'm most looking forward to for our team.
All right. Well, Josh, thanks so much for coming on and talking with us. And of course, best of luck to the Pioneers this season.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on.